Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Living on the Verge. I had a thought the other morning while I was journaling, and I haven't been able to shake it. And I'm going to share the thought with you. This is exactly what I wrote down. Your brain is asking for resolution, but life is giving you evolution. And then I went on with the rest of my journaling and the rest of my day. But the line itself stuck with me. And the reason that it stuck with me is because I think a lot of us walk around feeling like certain things in our life are unfinished. Maybe it's a situation that hasn't been resolved or a relationship dynamic that hasn't fully settled, or there's something that you have to make a decision about that's out there in the future, and the answer still feels pretty unclear. And so when all of these things run around in our head, our brains keep trying to push those things towards an answer. We want a moment where we can say, okay, check, take that off the list. That chapter is done. I understand what happened. I know where this is going. Truth is, the older I get, the more I realize that a lot of the most important parts of life actually don't resolve that way. It's not just a quick wrap it up and tie it with a bow and be done. They evolve. They change slowly. They shift over time. And sometimes we're in the middle of that evolution long before we understand what it's turning into. That's kind of what happened to me. And so today I want to talk a little bit about that tension between our brain's need for resolution and the way life inevitably unfolds through evolution instead. So let's get into it a little bit more. Let's dig. Why is it that humans want resolution? What is it? I mean, human beings really like resolution, let's face it. Think about how most stories work, whether it's a movie or a book or even a show. There's a beginning, there's conflict, and then there's resolution. We're wired to look for that ending, that big moment. Think about it. It's the reason why a cliffhanger is such a big deal, because we cannot wait for the resolution. And that's what's going to make us tune in to next week's show, right? We want that moment where everything is just going to make sense, where the mystery is solved, or the problem is fixed, or the character gets what's coming to them. And we unconsciously, I think anyway, expect our lives to work the same way. So the truth is that it comes from something. We didn't just wake up one day and decide, oh, we want resolution in everything we do. Early in life, a lot of things actually do resolve that way, right? You go to school, you do everything you need to do, you complete your homework, you go on to the next grade, and eventually you graduate, and eventually you graduate from high school. And so there's resolution. That chapter of your life is resolved. Or you work toward a job and eventually you get it. And then you build a career. Or you resolve to start a family. And so there are these big milestones and these big finish lines where you could definitely say, check that off the list. Yep, I got my family, or I have my career for sure, or whatever. And so the chapter is complete. But as life goes on, something interesting actually starts to happen. The finish lines, the moments, the milestones, they they tend to become fewer and fewer. And it's very interesting because in the last episode, we talked about something that I called intentional sequences. And those are the small things we repeat that quietly keep our lives moving forward. Stuff like your morning routines, right? Getting up, washing your face, brushing your teeth, making your bed, starting your coffee, feeding your dog. Maybe you open your mail. Maybe you read scripture. Maybe you journal. Maybe you go for a run. Who knows? But we have these morning routines. And then we have family traditions. There are those of us who year in and year out do the exact same thing for Easter and Christmas and Thanksgiving. And this is another idea that we are forming intentional sequences in our life and in our world. And habits create rhythm in our days, right? And the more I thought about this idea, the more I realized something else. Those sequences often keep running while life itself is evolving around us. So, what the heck do I mean by this? Well, think about it. You're brushing your teeth and you're washing your face and you're getting up day in and day out. And the sequences are just part of who you are as a person. But life itself is evolving. You're not brushing the same teeth that you were brushing 20 years ago. Sometimes you have to use a different toothpaste because maybe your teeth are more sensitive. Or maybe we used to spend hours and hours doing our hair, but we finally realized that the style that flatters us best only takes us 5 minutes. So it's still a part of our intentional sequence, but it's evolved. And the funny thing is, we may not feel like anything is dramatically changing, but over time, those small sequences carry us into entirely new chapters of life. And often we don't even realize it while it's happening. So, what's the shift? What is happening? Well, one thing I've noticed about midlife is that many of the situations we're living through, they don't come with clear conclusions. For example, our relationships don't always resolve, right? Maybe there's that friend that you haven't heard from or talked to in the longest time, but there wasn't a big old fallout or anything. Just life got to lifing. And, 1 month became 3 months, became 2.5 years since you've last sent a, hey, how you doing text. So there's things like that. And then sometimes relationships evolve and maybe you don't necessarily have the time or the energy to expend on a relationship that maybe you once did, or else the dynamics shift or the expectations change or roles change, right? When you were raising your family, chances are you surrounded yourself with parents of the friends of your children, because who had time? If you wanted to have any social life whatsoever, then you were going to have to turn the post-soccer game party for pizza for the kids into your Friday night getaway as well. That's just the way it really was. I mean, there's just no way around it. That's how life lived back in the day. But there isn't always a moment where you can say, okay, that relationship issue is finished. And the same thing tends to happen with regards to our identity. For decades, many of us defined ourselves by the roles we were playing: parent, professional, caretaker, provider. And then gradually, those roles start to shift. The kids grow up and go off and start lives of their own, or careers change and maybe you don't have to travel for your job as much as you used to, or retirement approaches, or retirement actually is here. And then suddenly the question becomes, who am I now? Our brains want that question resolved quickly. But the truth of the matter is, guys, life usually answers that question very slowly through evolution. And that's what I'm talking about. It's just a matter of how differently we start to notice the passing of time. And I had one of those quiet moments recently that kind of made me think about all of this. You know how sometimes life just taps you on the shoulder and reminds you that time is moving forward? It wasn't anything dramatic, just one of those everyday observations. Maybe you notice someone you've known for years is moving a little more carefully than they used to, or taking a little bit longer to get things done than they did before. Or you catch yourself thinking about the future in a different way than you did 10 years ago. And nothing is wrong, nothing is broken, but suddenly you realize that life is changing. And in that very moment, your brain wants reassurance. It wants resolution. It wants to know what the heck is going on. It wants to say, everything is exactly the same as it always was. Please don't change it. Please don't deviate from the norm that I am used to that brings me comfort in my head. And it's so funny because we strive all our life to get to a point where we don't have to be running and running and running. And then when we get to that point, it occurs to us that the running was part of the joy and was part of what kept us going. And it's just not that way. Life evolves, people evolve, relationships evolve. And folks, sometimes those small moments are quiet, silent invitations to appreciate where we are right now, instead of trying to freeze everything the way it used to be. I often see young women in their 30s or 40s, and they're so hard on themselves, constantly pointing out this flaw or that flaw, or the if only I could get to this weight, or if only I had this body attribute. And I'm sure you too know people that way. Insert whoever you are imagining in your head as I say this. But I always say, not so much outwardly anymore, because I don't want to be like the preachy Karen chick, but in my head, I always try to find a way to reassure them of their beauty in their current state and remind them to embrace what they have now. Because when I think back to all the ugly speak in my head about myself, whether it be my physical appearance or how much I was able to get accomplished and or achieve in any given day, I always go back to the same thought. I was so hard on myself, and my gosh, I was so whatever, whether it be, there was nothing wrong with my neck, or gosh, I had great cheekbones. What was I thinking? Or whatever it is, you can go down that list for yourself. We all have them. But the truth of the matter is, it's only going to happen when you realize that life is just one big evolution. Then it kind of stops you in your tracks and reminds you to enjoy what's happening right now. And there's another place where I've really noticed this idea, and it's when thinking about the future in things like finances, security, planning for the next chapter of life. Our brains really want certainty in those areas. At least I know mine does. And I just want to know, am I making the right choices? Is everything going to work out? Do we have a clear plan? It's that point where you start to make sure that your I's are dotted and your T's are crossed, and you're doing everything that you can to ensure your future success, because, oh my gosh, this is what we all worked and talked about all of these years, was this midlife age that you're supposed to prepare for. And here it is. So gosh, did I prepare? I don't know. My brain wants resolution. But the truth is, a lot of those answers, they don't arrive all at once. They evolve over time. Maybe your bills change because, you decide that suddenly you don't need 4 cable boxes when there's only 2 people living in your house. Or you finally took the time to go through all those recurring expenses on your credit card statement, and suddenly your finances are looking a lot better than you thought they were. Or maybe it's the opposite. Maybe suddenly there's an unexpected medical expense or something that you did not count on becoming a monthly bill. And now you have this fixed monthly bill that changes your finances. And then another reason that it doesn't always happen all at once is because we gather information. So I decided that I wanted to travel, and I realized that traveling was going to be really, really expensive. Well, since I've started traveling, I have learned tips and tricks and little shortcuts that are going to make it possible for me to travel a lot more frequently for a lot less money. And that is information that I didn't have before, because this has just evolved as I've started my travel journey. Or maybe we have conversations, or we meet someone who teaches us a different way to look at something, or a new implementation into something you've been doing for years that suddenly just changes your financial future. Or maybe you just adjust the plan. You finally decide, I don't need to be going up and down the stairs for the rest of my life. I am going to downsize, buy a house half of this size, and suddenly your financial future looks completely different. We rethink things, and slowly the situation changes and grows into what becomes the next chapter. But there isn't always a moment where everything suddenly feels perfectly resolved. Sometimes life is simply unfolding. Sometimes you don't realize you have a better way. You just look back and see that things have gotten better. And one of the interesting things about this stage of life is that sometimes everything around you is technically working. The house is functioning, it's clean, dishes are getting washed, laundry's getting done, the family's functioning. You're seeing each other relatively frequently, the kids are checking in, you're checking in, you're hanging out with your friends, the routines are functioning, all of your regular weekly things are getting accomplished, but nothing really feels finished. The projects continue. The responsibilities continue. And this one might shock you, but even personal growth continues. And that can feel uncomfortable because, again, as humans, we're wired to look for completion. We want the moment where we can say, okay, check, that part of life is done. But what if the reality is that most of life isn't meant to feel finished? What if most of life is meant to keep evolving? And maybe that isn't a flaw in the system. Maybe that is the system. So lately I've been experimenting with asking a different question. When something feels unresolved, I used to say, what can I do to get this done? Oh my gosh. Okay, let's make a list, check it off, and then add more things to the bottom of the list and check it off. And then I'll feel like everything is resolved. No. Instead of asking, when will this be resolved? I now try asking, what might this be evolving into? And that simple change in the way I am approaching the question changes the energy around it completely. Because evolution implies movement. It means things are constantly changing and moving, and it implies fluidity, and it implies life, right? It means you're alive. If things are evolving, it means you're living. It implies learning, adaptation, growth. In other words, something meaningful may be taking shape, even if we can't see the final outcome yet. And you guys, this simple shift in mindset has really lowered the stress and the tension in my busy mind. Just knowing that maybe there's something going on and I just don't know what lies at the other end of it, but I just need to take the steps today. It's really given me a certain sort of sense of peace. I don't have to know all of the answers. I don't have to have everything resolved in order to sit down and enjoy my show tonight. I could just be planning for something great that's around the corner, and I don't know what that is. So, let me leave you with this. If there's something in your life right now that feels unresolved, maybe you haven't been able to get that closet cleaned, or maybe it's something more intrapersonal, like you haven't been able to get out to that dinner with your favorite aunt, and she's getting older and you want to make sure that you put your time in and you want to spend time and hear all of the stories, but you just haven't done that. Maybe you haven't worked on that cookbook that you promised yourself you were going to work on. Maybe it's a relationship that you promised you were going to do better with, or a decision that you have to make. Or maybe it's the whole season of life that you're in and it feels uncertain. Well, I have a little bit of good news. It might not mean that something is wrong. It might just mean that you're living through a season of evolution. And even though your brain may be chomping at the bit to get that resolution, and it happens to the best of us, so it will happen again. But the next time it happens, I want you to think about this. Sometimes the most meaningful parts of life reveal themselves slowly as we grow into the next version of ourselves. And that's a beautiful thing. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If it resonated with you, please share it with a friend. And of course, I always appreciate you sending me a DM with any comments or questions. And also, if you took a moment to give me a 5-star review, that would make me pretty happy. And so, guys, I will be back. And until then, I will be right here living on the verge.